Are all gay men anxiously attached? Hey guys, Michael Pizzulo here, psychotherapist in West Hollywood. So I want to talk to you about attachment theory and gay men in particular. So if you're not familiar, attachment theory goes as follows. Basically, the way that you were nurtured and cared for by your parents when you were growing up creates an unconscious style of how you expect others to take care of you and the type of relationships that you gravitate towards. And it kind of splits into two categories. You're either securely attached, which means that you kind of have a reasonable expectation that people will meet your needs and that you can meet their needs and it's going to go relatively well, or insecurely attached where you don't feel like things will go, relatively seamlessly. And if you are insecurely attached, it tends to break off into two categories of either being more avoidant or more anxious. And I want to talk to you today about the anxious attachment because I think a lot of gay men fall into this one. I would say it goes without saying that most gay men will have some sort of attachment deficits just because the way we were raised, there was a lot of, conditioning about hiding parts of yourself, internalizing shame, and expecting that if people knew, the true you, that you would experience some sort of rejection, which is the complete opposite of how healthy attachments are formed. And I think this leads a lot of gay men to be more anxious. And the problem with this is that anxiety in our relationships ultimately ends up sabotaging them, ends up being very, self-defeating. The reason being that if you're anxious about holding on to someone, getting your needs met, making sure things stay secure, what you do is tend to be more clingy, which, as we know, tends to be quite off-putting. But more importantly, I think what ends up happening is that by leaning into the anxiety, you're actually not being your most authentic self. So you're actually leaning into the relationship from a place of panic and worry, which some of it is authentic and real, but you're also missing a lot of the other parts of you that your significant other, boyfriend, husband, whatever, doesn't get to see because the anxiety takes so much space in the room, if that makes sense. So a lot of people wonder then, like, well, what do I do? Can I change my attachment style? I would say overall, yes. I think that, the way we were molded is always going to be there. We can't rewrite our history, but we can definitely, grow, add on. And if you think of things as being on like a spectrum, if you're very, very, very anxious, I think you can definitely move more towards being securely attached. I think you may have some remnants of anxiety always there, but I think you can massively improve. I wouldn't expect yourself to go from one extreme to the other, to go from being like a anxiously attached person to an avoidantly attached person, because that's just sort of a completely different psychology. But think about just moving more towards health and security, and I think that's definitely possible if you do the work on yourself. And so then that leads into, so how do I do this? So, first and foremost, we heal in relationships just like we get hurt in relationships. So unfortunately, if we have a anxious attachment, there's going to be a natural pull toward people who reinforce it. So we're often going to unfortunately go towards people who are quite avoidant and make the anxiety worse. So you're going to want to be really mindful of that to make sure that you're not gravitating towards relationships that actually reinforce the anxiety. And that's going to be the general tendency because human beings just tend to go towards what's familiar rather than towards what's necessarily good for them. So picking partners who are healthy or healthier or not going to reinforce your anxious attachment is going to be really where to start. But then it's also going to come back to working on yourself, because the truth is that if you're someone who's anxiously attached, not only are you very preoccupied with hanging on to other people and the stability of the relationship and worrying about your needs getting met by them, but you also tend to be very dismissive of yourself. I think that's where the work really can come in, and that's where your power lies. So you want to start to think about, what is my relationship with myself? What is my relationship with my own needs? I find that a lot of people who have an anxious attachment, when they experience their own needs, they get really uncomfortable and they just want to quickly outsource it to someone else of, I don't know what to do with this. I don't like this. You take care of me. You validate me. You make me feel better, so on and so forth. So you're going to want to think about, am I rejecting myself a lot of times in this process? And can I start with me first before I take this to someone else? I think that you'll find that if you can start to actually sit with yourself, accept yourself, stop disowning your own needs and your own neediness, which we all have, that you're going to find yourself much less urgent about getting your partner to show up for you, be stable for you, and so on and so forth, because your bucket of needs is just not going to be as full. all the time. So I really think it does start with your relationship to yourself, and then the people that you choose to form romantic relationships with. So anyway, hope this was all helpful. If you're struggling with anxious attachment, welcome to life. It's very common. Don't worry, you're not alone. Curious to hear from you guys, like what you've done to improve your relationships, improve your attachment styles, and and how, growing up gay or being a gay man has influenced those sorts of things. So hope this was useful.